Conflict at work comes in all shapes and sizes. And whether you're debating a big strategic issue or fighting to hold on to your budget, or just frustrated with a team member who makes everything harder, dealing with conflict is something that every manager and employee must learn to do well. Now, today's guest is Justin Jones-Fosu. At the helm of Work Meaningful, Justin is the driving force and CEO behind a movement that empowers organizations across the globe, delivering over 50 keynote addresses a year on the pivotal topics of meaningful work and inclusion. His mission is to ignite transformation in corporate culture, guiding organizations and individuals to ascend to their peak potential through mastery of mindset, purpose, and performance. Before we dive in, be sure to hit that subscribe button. New episodes are released every week. Now here's the conversation with Justin. Thank you so much for joining me today, Justin. I'm super psyched to talk about conflict. As someone who is conflict avoidant, this is one of those things I could use all the help I can get. So I'm excited to learn from you and your expertise. So welcome so much to the show.
I disagree about being on this show. So I'm super thankful. Thank you so much, Mamie.
Well, maybe we should just start there. I am so impressed that you could even just say to someone, I disagree. That feels sometimes like so hard to just say it. I think about it and I'm like, is it worth saying? Should I just let this one go? How did you get comfortable? Or have you always been this way to just be able to say you know what? I disagree with that and I'm just going to tell you.
Yeah, I think I've always been outspoken. My mom credits that I was a little boy, little lad growing up that way. But it's interesting because in our research for the book, one of the things that we found is that I initially wanted to solve and write this book for people who disrespectfully disagreed with others. They're like, you're wrong, you're stupid, I think that's dumb, all these things. And it helped spend more time respectfully disagreeing. But as we dug deep into the research, oh my gosh, Mamie, we realized there's a whole nother category we were missing that we leaned into. And it's a category called disrespectful agreement. And it happens on two different fronts, right? And so one front is the person may have been young or, as a child, they may have been taught that kids should be seen and not heard. Or earlier in their career, they were taught disagreement was disrespectful, right? So they always had to agree with their superior, or even sometimes some underrepresented communities that may feel like I can't disagree or share that. But there's another category, it's what the young people call gaslighting, right? Of Mamie, I think that was a great idea, but behind your back, I'm like, Tila, I don't know what she was thinking. I think that was whack, right? And so whatever that thing may be, it's how do we spend more time there? And so one of the things that we're encouraging people to do, especially that may spend more time in disrespectful agreement, is practicing on low to medium commitment ideological divides or differences and talking with people that they love and trust and start sharing some of those things like, hey, I'm learning to spend more time in disagreement. And so it's the practice of that helps us to get better, right? We'll never feel 100% I can just always disagree. But the more and more we do it, especially with those that we love and trust, it helps us to do it with those that we don't know.
Oh, yes. Practice is always the thing that it comes down to. You have to do it to be able to do it, which is one of the tricky things with learning new behaviors because it feels so scary to do. I'm fascinated by this category of people that you discovered or these behaviors that you discovered of people kind of agreeing when they're not really agreeing. And I'm wondering if you discovered any particular language that was helpful for that intro agreement, that for the first or the intro disagreement, meaning you start by saying, I respectfully disagree. Or, hold on right there a second. I want to disagree with this. Or what do you do when you're just trying to take a baby step in? Was there something that came out of those conversations that you had in the interviews or something else you've learned that can just help us take that first little step in when you're thinking, I don't want to be the person who's now going to respectfully disagree or disagree respectfully?
Well, one of the things that we often find is that we shouldn't do it for right off, right? Especially if time permits, right? Now, obviously, when you're working with budgets and you may be in a time crunch for a meeting and different things, that you might have to lean in a little harder than you would normally. But what we recommend is to ask questions first. Because sometimes we're disagreeing on things that we're talking about two different things, right? That's why I love when people say, I don't like diversity and inclusion. And I love when people say that. And the reason I say that is because my first response back is, well, tell me how you define it. Because how I define it is very different, right? It's all of us. And I know people value their own lives, right? And so as I'm talking about, these things, I have to first get alignment on what are we actually disagreeing on. And so one of the tools or practical things that we encourage people to use is a tool we call the power of three. And a power of three is where I've leaned in at least into the third level of the conversation where I'm expressing a sense of understanding. So it could be, Mimi, how are you doing today? You say, oh, Justin, I'm fine, right? I'm like, I'm fine too. That's power of one. If I took it a step further and said, oh, what makes you fine? Right? You say, oh, I heard this interesting bald head guy, right? Then I'm like, okay, I know that bald head guy. That's power of two. But power of three is where it may have gone to the third level, like what made him interesting. And oftentimes in those moments, if we are able to get to the third level, express a level of understanding, what this whole body of research called conversational receptiveness shows us is that people actually want to have more conversations with people when, one, they hedge their claims. And so I may say something like, hey, from my understanding, one of the things that I've sometimes have seen is, or sometimes this might have happened, and or even say, you know what, I can see how you got there, or expressing some aspect of positivity. So we encourage people not to lean into the automatic, I disagree, but to lean into one, with more questions, two, hedging their claims, not absolutes, and three, sharing that you can see their journey, because sometimes maybe some people just want to be heard and felt like they were taken seriously.
Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that you just said I don't actually have to say the words I disagree. I can actually
Right.
do something else. That makes me so much happier. But
Yes.
also this power of three, I love this. I've never heard this before, is to really structure yourself even and to say, like, have I explored enough? Have I gone deep enough in this conversation to understand what it is that we're actually talking about here? And you're totally right. I've seen this less in the workplace, but definitely in my marriage, where my husband and I are disagreeing on something and then we realize we're actually just saying the same thing using different words.
Right.
And we're like, oh yeah, okay. And I know what happens in the workplace. It absolutely does. And I'm sure that everyone listening is like, oh yeah, I've seen this happen before. So this is such a great tip and trick. I'm wondering if you have any stories from a client who's kind of maybe struggled with this in the past, or for yourself, where you really like came around and understood something differently because you took the time to ask those questions and to reflect back what you were hearing and help the person feel heard.
I'll give you two different approaches to it. So one, we just spent some time with Toyota headquarters and working with some of their leaders. And one of the things is we actually, in the sessions, we have them practice the power of three. And as they were walking through the power of three, some people were like, oh my gosh, like I've known this person for over 20 plus years. And like I've never experienced them this way. Right? Because they took that structured moment to actually deeply listen. And in our society, we've constructed in a way that's very distracted listening rather than true deep listening. And so I've heard not only one, people connect with people in deeper ways, which that relational capital matters, especially when we get to matters of conflict. But two, another example, I recently got a text message back from somebody who checked out the book. And he was actually in New York, he's a restaurant manager. And one of the things he shared is like, I practiced the power of three and listening and actually hedging my claims. And he was like, the level of conversation I was able to have with my bar manager, he was like, has never occurred before. And my bar manager was like, wow, like I actually felt heard and valued, because it was always just this back and forth. And it actually led to them having a better relationship, for them to continue to have more productive meetings, because they were just at odds about some of the staffing issues and some of the things that they were going to handle. And I actually got that, a friend sent them the book and they sent me back the text message they sent to them. And so we find that in real life, this is working, right? Because what people often aren't doing, and that's what we found in our research, is that they're listening to the power of one or the power of two. And they can't wait to bring it back to themselves. We call it double Dutch style communication. Right? And for those who are listening that don't know what double Dutch is, it's sometimes a single rope that's just jumping rope, but a double Dutch are two ropes, like boom, 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 and somebody waiting to jump in. And oftentimes in our conversations, we're waiting to jump in, to share why we disagree, to share why we don't believe it. And even if we're not jumping in verbally, we could be jumping in mentally. And so even for that person who's quiet that says, hey, I'm just going to be quiet, I'm not going to even say anything, but they've already debunked, oh, I don't believe that, I think that's stupid, I don't like this, right? And so what we encourage people to do is lean into this place of curiosity and to start practicing listening at least into that third level. Now, initially it feels, even the same thing for me when I started practicing in work and even with my kids, it felt a little awkward because it wasn't something I was used to. And part of it is because I found is that most people are trying to find and form connections. But in trying to form those connections with people, sometimes we end up taking control. And so instead of taking control, seeking for that deeper understanding is powerful.
I so appreciate that you just mentioned that it can feel a little awkward, especially if you're not used to having conversations like this. Because I can imagine that you're talking with a colleague or you're in a meeting and you're asking these questions, and it might feel like you're moving really slowly, or you're going too personal, or you're diving deep really quickly before they're like the conversation's ready for it. But it sounds like we should prepare ourselves that might happen. It might feel awkward, but that we still need to push through, because on the other side of that conversation is where we get to some sort of resolution or agreement, or at least we're going to agree to disagree. Is that true?
It's close. If you would allow me to add to that. So one piece of that is we encourage people, if you don't have the words to say, use the power 3 words of tell me more. Because it always is an invitation for people to continue to go deeper, or tell me how you got there, or a variation of that. And one of the things that we, to add to that, is that we encourage people to not agree to disagree. All right. And that actually, for our 5 pillars, our 5th pillar deals with that a little bit. And because I've seen a lot of people agree to disagree very disrespectfully and or it's been very dismissive, right? And so I've said my point, let's just agree to disagree. And it becomes more dismissive versus showing that you truly value. So what we encourage people to is to agree to respect. And agree to respect simply means that try your best to leave each conversation, whether in conflict or not, with that person feeling fully acknowledged. Now, you say, how do you do that, right? I love Jean Zhao, Stanford professor. She came up with this concept called thank you because. And thank you because she is simply where you lean in. It's like, Mamie, thank you, because I really appreciated you having this conversation with me today. I learned something new that I've never heard before. Or thank you because you said 3 things and number 2 really stood out to me. I want to dive in deeper. Or last, maybe thank you because this was a tough conversation and you didn't have to have it, but I appreciate you choosing to have it with me. Now, maybe not once did I just say I agree with you, but in each of those moments, I chose to respect you, to show full acknowledgement of what you said. And even more so in a lens of our conversation, I hopefully showed you that I better understood how you got there, even if I don't fully agree with your outcomes. So those are really practical ways. And we've seen that have phenomenal impact when people's conversations, where people just sometimes want to feel valued and heard. Did you take the time to truly listen, or did you automatically create and start filling in the gaps with your own conclusions?
I can see how using thank you because and the power 3 can instantly change a conversation that you're having with your team members from something that could feel kind of contentious or combative or even patronizing into something that is relationship strengthening, that is insight generating, right? Like, this is powerful, powerful stuff. And, it never really occurred to me to take the idea of having a disagreement or a conflict and flipping it into something that could truly be a positive experience for everyone involved. So thank you for giving me an entire new perspective on what conflict can generate for us and for our team members.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, let's talk about some different kinds of conflicts or disagreements or moments that might happen in the workplace where these or other techniques can be applicable. So I'm thinking about, I had a colleague many, many years ago who, when we were all in person together, would snap their gum all the time. And it was super, super annoying and distracting as we were trying to work. And it always felt like I shouldn't say something because they have the right to sit and do what they need to do to work. And it's my problem. And I just need to put my headphones on, but I didn't like wearing headphones. And it felt like something it was a conflict that I was trying not to turn into a conflict. And it didn't ever quite get resolved. So I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts about what do you do when you have that colleague who you're trying to be respectful because they get to be themselves and you want them to feel comfortable and be able to do their good work, but it also grates on you, or it's just at odds with how you want to work or how you want to show up in that relationship? Any thoughts?
Let me be very clear. This is a very gray space, because one thing that we're very intentional about is who is the only person that you and I can control. and our kids. And so and I'm joking because I've tried that, it doesn't work, or pets to be inclusive. But one of the things we often encourage people, if you are able to, right, to not start there. Relational capital has so much impact, especially for the manager, right? If every time I talk to somebody or a person next to me, it's about something that they've done wrong, oftentimes that negativity bias kicks in, and now they see us as negative, right? And so their lens that they look through us, even if we have something that's powerfully helpful, is through a negative lens. And so I would first encourage people, and don't do the sandwich model. I'm not saying this. Please hear me. I'm not saying do the sandwich model, but to ask questions like, have you gone out to lunch with this person? Right? Have you had a chance to, hey, I'd love to go grab coffee with you, right? Now, if you can't, if they're doing something, they're playing their music too loud in the moment, right? So that's a different kind of example. Let me give a way to approach it. We call it the 2 statements. So the first statement is to ask if you're able to share something. And I know in our society, that's like taboo. We don't ask. I can just post what I want on social media and say what I want on the message boards anonymously. But to ask, and so if you it's a person like, hey, Harold, hey, do you mind if I share some feedback with you real quick? Now, Harold has 2 decisions. Harold can either say no, which very rarely happens, but at that point, you may say, hey, when you're open to it, I'd love to share something because it's something that might be impacting our working relationship. If Harold says yes, which normally happens, say, hey, I know this is probably not your intention, or you may not even know that you're doing this, but one of the things that I'm seeing is that the music is a little louder and it's disrupting me, or snapping the gum, and I wish I could put on headphones, because I realize it might be my issue. But it's hard for me to wear headphones. Are you okay potentially no longer stopping music or play the music loud? And so what this does, again, everybody's very different. Is 1, hopefully you have relational capital, but 2, you have to first ask to give feedback. You have to first ask to give this constructive feedback. If you don't ask, that person never can open up to receive what you might share. And so defensive walls might come up immediately, and they may go into the blaming aspect. They still may do it even as you share, and you do it in a very nice way. But the second piece of this, which is very important, is to assume positive intent, and to not only assume it, but to communicate it, because you want to let them know, hey, I know you're probably not doing this on purpose. You may not even know you're doing it, because what they'll immediately do if you don't do that is that they'll say, well, I didn't know I was doing it. Or, hey, I didn't try to do it to impact the workplace negatively, and they go into defense mode. So if you address those earlier on, it allows you to have a much more productive conversation. Again, all this hopefully is done with a positive relational capital, but again, very gray, because you have to know how people work and operate, and it might not even be in the moment that you address it, because you might be a little bit frustrated.
Yes. And now I'm like wishing that I would have said to my colleague, not when we were sitting in the office, maybe when we were walking out one day, hey, I don't know if do you notice that you snap your gum? Is that something you do? Like it almost in a way that's like, I don't have to give you feedback that it's terrible, but I do want to find out and kind of give you like, oh, did you know this? And then based on that, then I can decide how I want to give them any feedback later. But I never even just like brought it up. I was so avoidant. Okay, let's switch to like from kind of behavioral things, which can feel kind of very personal. And I think you're so right on to say you have to have that relational capital before you can say anything. Let's talk about ideas, right? You're in a meeting and the group is making a decision. Everyone is feeling like, yes, this is a great decision. And you're sitting there going like, this is a terrible decision. This is going to take us down the wrong path. This is why I think this. And again, some people might sit there and go like, I don't want to be the spoiler. I don't want to be the one who's going to like raise this issue and then create a big problem, and everyone's going to be mad at me and everyone's going to be frustrated. I'm slowing things down. Any thoughts on how we kind of introduce conflict in those kinds of spaces?
Most of the conflict stuff that we talked about, or as we delve into the research, it dealt with in a very reactive way. And I want to start giving some people some tools to handle it proactively, because it's really not only personally, but professionally. So 2 different ways. One is, as leaders, as managers, it's important for us to start crafting these with those that we lead, to start creating the culture, right? So one thing that I do within my team, right, when we start off each meeting and we have to make some important decisions, I start off by making this very intentional statement. I want you all to disagree with me and tell me how this won't work. Now, as a manager, as a leader, one of the things I've realized is that I need to have innovation. And innovation does not just come because I had a good idea. Innovation comes from creating this connected conversation that allows us to come up with something new. That's why during my MBA, I read one of the best books I've ever read that spoke to this. Is a book called Dialogue, The Art of Thinking Together. And it talked about it's not about A, it's not about B, it's about how do we create C together. And so you have to go into it communicating to your team and to that project team that you want to come up with ideas that are different than what might be there. 2, give permission for people to actually share something that diverges from the norm. And so, hey, if you feel like everybody's on one page and you have a different opinion, I want you to share that because it's going to be very important for the group to allow us to come up with the best possible idea. But 3 is to reward consistently the divergent view. And what do I mean by that? I'm not talking about compensation or giving money. Like, here you go, here's $5 for that different. But I am saying, Mamie, thank you so much for bringing up that different view. It's helping us to find something that's going to be even better than what we currently have. Those are ways that we can start preemptively creating these cultures where people feel like they can be open, honest, and share. Now, if you're in that place and you're sitting in that meeting right now and your people are saying, oh, this is a great idea, this is awesome, and you have this divergent view, again, utilize this the awesomeness of asking. Hey y'all, are you all open to hearing a different view? Now, again, you've allowed people psychologically to open up and know that you're going to share a view that diverges from the norm. And then likely what's going to happen is, oh yeah, absolutely. Or you might say, hey, we have 1 minute, so you may be quick with it, or it may not be the right time for it, and then you come back to it. But at least you've asked the question and opened up people and let people know that there's opportunity for a different viewpoint that's there. But that's one of the things we consistently find is that people have more success when they ask rather than just jump in and say, hey, I think this view is better than this, because now people are defending their view rather than coming up with something that could be even better.
I love that. I love that simple act of just asking, hey, is it okay if I share a different perspective? And that you're totally right. It gets people into a mindset of openness instead of conflict. And I'm imagining we could stack these techniques, and instead of waiting for people then to ask me questions to unpack, I could actually, in my own spiel, go through the power of 3 as I'm explaining my different perspective. Here's what I think. Here's why I think it. Here's my understanding of it, so that you're giving them enough to go on and not just that surface, which I think we tend to kind of say, like, I disagree because 1 line, and that's it.
And to add to that, which I think was brilliant, Mimi, is even before you share your diverging view, share your understanding of what's already been shared.
Ooh, yes.
Because that's one of the things, because what people are thinking likely when people start sharing a different perspective, like, oh, they didn't really get it. Right? And we operate by that, for the illusion of asymmetric insight, which is a powerful psychological concept that, I understand you completely, but I'm just really complex. I'm hard to understand. And we treat the same things with our perspective and our views, right? Right? If as long as you just had the same amount of information as I did. And so that's why you often have people repeat the exact same thing, because they like, oh, you just didn't get what I meant, what I said, right? And so if you can say, hey, like, I love that we want to donate this amount of money towards the marketing budget. I think that's a powerful potential, right? I can see why that could have a great impact on our sales and different things. But have you all considered, if we spend this amount of money on this for marketing, how that might impact how we do our internal accounting? See, those are just those small moments where you're communicating one understanding of how they got there, even after you've asked, hey, are you open to a diverging view?
I'm wondering about how we can help our team members engage in these same behaviors so that we don't get into the, okay, I disagreed, I said my piece, but now I'm going to basically undermine this decision every single step of the way because I didn't really share my disagreements. And they were doing the, like, I'm agreeing, but I'm not really agreeing thing. Any thoughts on how we can kind of help our team members get out of that zone and into a more open zone where they are sharing their thoughts, but also buying into decisions when it may not be exactly what they wanted at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think openly talking about how conflict actually helps teams. Is very, very important. What do I mean by that? So if I'm in a meeting and we've went through something and we went through a conflict, coming back to that conflict, like, hey, y'all, I'm really glad we went through that conflict because it helped us to become better. And we realize that we're not always going to get that full maximum of what we thought. And it may not even be 50-50. Most of the time it's not going to be. But I really appreciate, how we've leaned into the decision and how we've been able to move forward. Now, why is that important? Because us saying that frames the opportunity of we're not always going to get our way. We're not always going to get that perspective. And maybe you're meeting with your direct report who feels like they don't have value because their idea wasn't taken again. What do you say to that person? Well, one of the things that we continue to encourage people is that, one, remind people that you can only control yourself and how you choose to show up. But two, how would you want someone else to engage your idea if your idea was the one who won out, or if your idea was the one that was taken or majority of what you were shared? And it's the aspect of give and take, but investing in the relational behaviors, because there's going to be a point where your idea is going to be the one that's going to lead, and you want them to give the same type of high energy, the same type of, all right, let's go, let's support it, and ways to make it move forward. And last but not least, you have to figure out that analogy that works for you. Large parts of our team, love sports. And so we talk about, all the diverging views that may exist in sports, but there's other things, business ideas that have been very different from Google to all these other places. And we share how they've actually become better companies because they work through those moments of healthy conflict. And so if you're able to consistently share with people that, one, not everybody's going to get their way. Two, that you're creating a culture of dialogue where it's not about A or B, it's about C, is that people get used to not getting my way, but getting our way and then supporting our way because you want that same support in return.
I'm so glad that you didn't say you just need to convince people, like get everyone so excited, convince them. Because I feel like that's where we sometimes get in trouble, is when we try to make everybody, feel so excited about this project or so excited about this decision or so excited about this idea. And that's a losing battle. And instead, just acknowledging, like, you don't have to love this idea, but we're a team, as you said, right? And we are all going to put our best efforts forward because this is the direction we're moving in. And if it was your thought or your decision or your idea, you would want everyone to do the same for you. And that relying on those relationships makes so much more sense than trying to be convincing. All right. We do need to wrap up, Justin. So tell us about a great manager that you worked for and what made this person such a fabulous boss.
This guy named Brian Peck. And Brian Peck, I remember when we first met, at the time, I worked for Enterprise Rent a Car as an intern, and it's always stood out to me. In our first meeting, he said, "Justin, I want you to fail." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, it's our first meeting. Like, what do you like? What do you mean?" And he was like, "No, let me tell you what I mean by that. I want you to try new things that maybe are outside of the norm, outside of the box." And I want you to do them strategically, like just don't be reckless, but I'm going to be here to support you. So even as you fail, it's going to be a powerful opportunity for learning and growth. And it always stood out to me because I remember this statement. So I do this thing called a birthday challenge where I do something new every year. And I remember going mountain biking for the first time. And I fell off a bridge the first time mountain biking, right? It was a small bridge. I hurt my hip. Don't judge me. I started looking in your eyes, maybe.
No, I'm worried for you.
I ran into this guy who was like an expert mountain biker, and he's like, hey, Justin, how was your first time mountain biking? And as I'm walking my bike up the hill, I'm like, I fell off a bridge. And without skipping a beat, maybe he was like, "Oh, that's cool." He's like, because if you're not falling, you're not really riding. And that is the essence of why I love Brian. Because Brian taught me that failure actually leads to greater innovation. And I ask people all the time, modern managers, right? Everyday people, like, when's the last time that you put yourself out there so far that you failed? Because if you haven't had one of those moments in a while, then you actually might not be trying hard enough. So that's why Brian Peck is one of my favorite managers, because he embedded that in me. And so I also now encourage my team. I was like, hey, you're all going to fail. And that's okay, because we're going to find and grow together. Because if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough.
Incredible. And where can people learn more about you, keep up with your work, tell us about your book, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so you can find me at workmeaningful.com, where we're helping organizations and professionals bring meaning to their work. The book information is at howtorespectfullydisagree.com. We have an RDQ coming, a respectful disagreement quotient, so you can find out where you are on that continuum. And last but not least, I love LinkedIn. So I'm Justin Jones-Fosu on LinkedIn. If you find a bald guy on there, it's probably me.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Justin. I am so excited to put all of these tips and practices into play, especially because, as I mentioned, I like to avoid conflict. And so now I have some good tools in my toolbox to help me do better.
Thank you, Mamie. You're awesome. And I actually agree that you did a great job today. So thank you.